Hi everyone, my name is Meredith. I write novels and I love studying writing craft. And today I want to talk about reverse outlining, which is a technique that I love doing that is so helpful for any type of brainstorming about your project or obviously editing and revising. I'm going to go through what it is, who can benefit from it, how to do it, and all of the different kinds of reverse outlines that I have used in the past or that have been helpful for me. And you don't have to use all of these because that would be a lot of time spent doing this. But if you find the one that works for you, it can be super helpful. So reverse outlining is a technique where after you've written the draft, you go back and you write down an outline of what you actually wrote. So this is not a plan for the future. This is what did I actually put on the page? And so it becomes a bird's eye view of all of your plot points, your character arcs, all of the stuff that you're going to need to change in developmental edits. Both pantsers and plotters can benefit from this because I think at the end of the day, even if you are a hardcore plotter, your book sometimes ends up a little bit differently than you planned, and that's okay. That's the process of writing. It's creative. Sometimes you change things, have better ideas, or sometimes you just mess up and you forget that you already wrote something, or your plot that you planned out wasn't perfect and you have a plot hole. And so all that stuff can happen. And so when you write down what you actually wrote, it may look different than your outline. And for pantsers, this is super helpful because you might not even have an outline, or it might be low on detail, or it could be half finished like mine was when I started drafting. The benefit of this is that when you want to find issues, when you want to change things, when you want to plan how to make it better, you don't have to sort through all of your 100,000 words or more of your actual manuscript to do this. You can just look at the bird's eye view and you can get a lot of work done in a very small amount of time when you're looking at the pieces rather than all of the words that are constructing this larger picture. How do you create a reverse outline? So what I did the first time was I took really careful notes going back and doing a reread of my entire first draft. That took a very long time. It was very tedious. However, I still think that it's a good idea if you don't have an updated outline to work with. So I would, definitely suggest doing a really careful read through of your book and creating this reverse outline in a different document. However, probably a better practice is if you haven't written the draft yet and you're thinking about the next stages. What I did when I was writing my second draft, it was a rewrite, so it was completely from the ground up, starting over. I kept a reverse outline as I went. So I kept a really updated list of all of my major plot points as I went through and wrote them, and that has saved me a lot of time on the editing end. So those are two ways of creating a reverse outline, either as you go or at the end if you already have a first draft. So then what to include in your reverse outline. So this is where we get down to all the different kinds of reverse outlines you can have and which ones are useful for which types of editing. What you want to do with your story and what you're concerned about is going to drive the type of information that you include in your reverse outline. So let's talk about each type and what they might be useful for. First off, let's start with the bare bones of plot. This is called a scene list. So what I did when creating a scene list is I just went through every single scene that seemed to encapsulate one event that didn't have a POV switch, that didn't have a place or a time shift, and I tried to encapsulate them into scenes. And now sometimes in a first draft, it's going to be messy where it looks like it's all strung together. So try to differentiate one scene from the next. How scenes are traditionally defined is that there's a change from the beginning to the end. It either goes good to bad, bad to worst, or good to better. And so there's some type of shift that happens, something that gets accomplished in a scene. So you want to separate each one of those change beats into its own scene. And then you just write out a really simple summary of what changes. Try to keep it to one sentence, maybe two if there's something changes, but also there's an information piece revealed. And so then you have your scenes listed out from 1 to however many. I had 167, so there can be a lot of these. And when you have that bare bones of a skeleton of your book, you're going to be able to see exactly which scenes are useful, are serving the story, and which ones are not. So this is for if you really need to dig into developmental edits and you need to do some really deep work either on character arcs or on plot, just to figure out what you actually have to organize your thoughts and to do some major changes. So then you can actually pull out and do an even more bare bones where you don't even have the scenes, but you have kind of the plot structure beats. So say if you know Save the Cat, you just have, okay, what happens at the inciting incident? What happens at the jump into Act 2? What happens at the midpoint? What's the all is lost moment? What's the finale? And then what's my ending scene? And so you can pull back and only do those big tentpole scenes that really hold up the story. And if you want to work on those and just make sure you have the major beats down, you can do that. The third type is kind of what I call the master list or the master reverse outline, and this basically includes everything. So this is a lot more detailed, this takes up more page space, and this is the one that I created as I was writing the book. And so in each scene, I included a pretty detailed list of all the information, how the character arc shifted, like what decisions the character has made, what changed from the beginning of the scene to the end of the scene, and anything that I thought was relevant that I might need to change later. And so this is pretty detailed. If you're really working on a section that is just not up to snuff, you can dig into this master reverse outline and see all of the elements that helped construct this scene and figure out which ones are working and which ones are not. And that is not going to be as helpful with just a scene list because there's not as much detail. So there's not as much to work with if you're really trying to target a specific section of your plot or your story. Plus, if you have this master list, it's basically like you have all of the most important information about your story in one place. And I think that that's really, really, really helpful, especially if you're like, okay, I need to make a huge big picture change, and you can pinpoint those locations without having to read back through the entire manuscript. So I find it really helpful to create this master list, but it is a lot of work. So if that's not what you need, there are other types. So now there's just the character arc reverse outline. And this does not talk necessarily about the external events, but more the internal events, the shifts in your character. What you want to happen in your story is for the internal arc to drive the external, to drive the plot. So it's character driven. Your characters are making choices and decisions based on what's going on inside of them. And that is creating the external plot. What you can do is just write down those internal shifts. Say if your character wants to push people away, so you can track the change in the development of this character warming up to people and then, eventually trusting people and then losing trust in people in the all is lost moment. And then what's the finale that allows them to really prove that they've gained this trust and that people are trustworthy and they allow themselves to be loved. You can track this whole change of your character and focus only on that. Don't focus on information reveals. Don't focus on external plot. Focus on those moments that change and push the character internally, or that they make decisions internally that pushes them onto a new path. The next kind of reverse outline is the one that I think has helped me the most, and I call this information control. Even if you're not writing a mystery, you're still going to have a lot of information that needs to be revealed, such as backstory. When is the character going to reveal their tragic backstory? A book is built on revealing information to the reader. Even in a genre like literary fiction, it's based on getting to know people, getting to know characters. And so information reveals are key to building a story, even if it's not a mystery, but especially if you have a mystery, there's a lot that needs to happen with information reveals. And part of the tricky part about information reveals is making sure that the information is revealed at the right moment and the moment where it can be most impactful, both to the reader and to the characters themselves. So this is tricky. And so what I find helpful is to create a reverse outline of only revealed information. So whether that's, character stuff like character backstory, character secrets, whatever secret shame that they're hiding, or whether it's part of the mystery and when they find that out and how they find that out. This can reveal plot holes. This can make you see that one section of your book is heavier on the information reveals than another, and you need to spread it out. And in general, it can just help you track the flow of information and make sure that the mystery itself makes sense. So information control is one of my best tips for actually creating a story that logically and reasonably makes sense and fits together. And then the last type of reverse outline that I have used personally and found helpful is the plot archetype or plot genre reverse outline. So this is built on a foundation that goes back to Brandon Sanderson, Save the Cat, and the Story Grid all talk about plot genres, where it basically talks about a type of plot that the character goes on, and what type of plot you choose determines the character's goals. I have a video where I talk a little bit more about this, so I'll link that up here, but it's essentially like a mystery plot is a plot archetype, and it's driven by someone trying to figure out a question. Whereas a romance plot archetype would be driven by someone trying to achieve love or to be with somebody. The Story Grid goes into tons and tons and tons of these plot archetypes or genres, like a revenge plot where the hero is chasing after the villain, or a hunted plot where the villain is chasing after the hero, or a holdout plot where the goal of the story is to hold out until a force can come in and save the day. So there's all of these different kinds of plot archetypes. And what this is getting at is talking about the fact that stories can have more than one plot archetype. So in my book, I have a mystery plot, I have a romance subplot, I also have a mentor and apprentice plot. So I have 3 plot archetypes that can all be outlined separately. And the key here is to pull these archetypes apart or these genres apart and to plot just one and track the progress on one. Basically, make sure that all of them make sense separately and then to weave them together in a way that balances the three and has the emphasis on whichever one you want to be the most central plot. So this is typically helpful if your story is overly complex, or if you're confused about it, or if you have these multiple plot archetypes. If you only have a mystery plot and that's the only type of plot that you have, you might not need to make this because this would just be your reverse outline. But if you have multiple plots or significant subplots that you are having trouble with, consider pulling them apart, creating their own reverse outlines, and making sure that those plots by themselves make sense and then woven together with the whole story makes sense. Those are all the different kinds of reverse outlines that I have personally used and created and found really, really helpful. But I think that there's also the idea of a reverse outline of whatever element you need to track throughout your story. So if you have a specific element that you're confused about, you lose the thread of, you want to make sure that it is cohesive and that it's there throughout, you can pick that out from the story, plot it on a reverse outline, and see what you did with it and see how you want to change it. So there's also the blank reverse outline of any element that would be helpful to pull out from the story and look at with a microscope. Reverse outlines are an incredible tool to see what you have, to see what you're working with, to change on a macro level, and then implement that change in your book by basically having a map. So having this x-ray, this skeleton, this reverse outline is so, so helpful for actually seeing what you have to work with and then effectively working with it. So if you haven't written one, try writing one out for your book and also keep it up to date so that you always know what you're working with and where you are in your story. So hopefully this helps you clarify your thoughts and stay organized as you're going through the process of editing and revising and making your book better. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a like and also subscribe to see more videos from me. Happy writing and reverse outlining, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.